Hi everyone, welcome back. Thanks for joining us today. We've got a brand new story to share with you. So let's begin. My name is Robert. I decided I was done fighting for my marriage when my wife said something to me at dinner that I don't think I'll ever forget. We were sitting across from each other when she said, "I'm in love with someone else." Right there at that table, something inside me shut off. I didn't argue or ask her to explain. I just knew. I was done. I signaled to the waiter, paid the bill, got up from my seat, and walked out of that restaurant, leaving her right there at the table. She never expected that, and what came next? When I look back on my marriage to my wife, Susan, it still amazes me is how quiet the breakdown was. Our marriage didn't fall apart overnight, and it didn't explode. It just faded, slowly and quietly. Almost like watching paint peel off a wall over the years. You don't notice it at first, until one day you realize the whole thing looks worn out and colorless. We stopped being husband and wife long before either of us said it out loud. Although we still lived in the same house, ate at the same table, even slept in the same bed, the closeness all disappeared bit by bit. We had become more like roommates than a couple. There were days we'd go without saying more than a few words to each other. And when we did talk, it was about bills, groceries, or her work schedule. And yet, strangely enough, there was no fighting. We didn't argue because neither of us cared enough anymore to even try. That might be the saddest part. You'd think silence is peaceful, but in a marriage where love used to live, silence feels like slow death. I remember realizing that we hadn't even touched each other in a long time. I had gotten used to the cold air between us, but it wasn't always like that. That's what makes it hurt more. We used to be deeply in love. I used to feel like I was her person, someone she could lean on, someone she chose. But over the years, the connection that held us together thinned out until it snapped completely. And neither of us rushed to tie it back. So when I say our marriage was over long before she whispered that she was in love with someone else, I mean it. That night wasn't the beginning of the end. It was just the moment I stopped pretending there was anything left to save. When I met Susan and we began dating, I was in my late 20s, focused, stable, and working a decent job at a well-known agrochemical company. She was the kind of woman who spoke about her dreams with her whole chest, as if she could already see the future clearly. From the very first few times we talked, it was obvious that she had a vision and wanted to build a wellness retail business. She had mapped out both her short-term goals and long-term plans, like she'd been rehearsing them for years. She knew what products she wanted to sell, how she wanted to brand them, and even what kind of environment she wanted to create for her customers. She didn't just have a dream. She had a blueprint to achieve it. But then, she shared something more personal. She told me about how hard it had been trying to get that business off the ground. She'd applied for funding, reached out to people, even tried small-scale testing of her ideas, but nothing was really taking off. She lacked the capital to scale it properly, and it was clear that this weighed heavily on her. Now, I will be honest with you, I hardly throw money around, especially not into something that has no guarantee of success. I had worked hard for my savings, but as I sat there listening to her talk one night, with so much belief in something that hadn't even started yet, I made a decision that even surprised me. I dipped into my personal savings and gave her $50,000 to invest in the business. I just believed in her and what she wanted to build, and I wanted to be a part of helping her get there. The look on her face that night says it all, and I'll never forget it. She was completely overwhelmed. She told me no one had ever done something like that for her. Not family or friends. She looked at me like I had just given her the world, and her voice cracked a little when she kept saying, "Thank you." She told me she'd never forget this, that I had changed everything for her. That was the one time I genuinely remember her looking at me with not just gratitude, but admiration. And for me, that mattered more than anything. She went ahead and did things the right way. She even mentioned the legal framework she had put in place, how everything was being registered under proper terms, and how she wanted everything transparent from the start. On the surface, it looked like just a business deal. But for me, it was much more than that. I didn't see it as simply investing in a company. I saw it as investing in us, and in the future of the woman I loved and wanted to spend my life with. That money wasn't just cash from my savings. It was a piece of me I was giving to help her build her dream. With the funding, things started moving quickly. She expanded the business services, hired a few staff, redesigned the branding, and pushed marketing campaigns both online and through local wellness communities. Every week, I'd see some kind of progress. It felt good to watch something she had only ever talked about late at night come alive in real time. I was genuinely proud of her, and I supported her without holding back. When you see the person you love grow into their potential, there's a kind of joy that's hard to explain. I saw her light up with each milestone, and for a while, I felt like I was part of that light. Not too long after her business picked up steam, we got married. I was excited. Honestly, I thought we were heading into the perfect setup, two driven people with shared goals, pushing forward together. I imagined a future filled with progress, support, and maybe even starting a family once things got more stable. The early days of our marriage were peaceful. We understood each other's ambitions. We cheered each other on. She'd tell me how grateful she was and called me her silent strength. We weren't perfect, but it felt like we were aligned. As Susan's business started gaining momentum, things changed. Still, I supported her. I told myself, this is what growth looks like. Long hours, stress, time away from home. It's just a season to get things off the ground. But then the season didn't pass. She got busier, coming home well into the night. Some days, I'd walk into our house after work, and it'd be quiet. When she finally came through the door, she'd give a tired smile and say something like, "Sorry, today was crazy." At first, I nodded and let it go. But as time passed, I started to notice more. She seems to devote more time to anything but me. Her wardrobe changed, and her style became more polished, more expensive. I also noticed that she started spending time with different people. Some of the mutual friends we used to go out with were no longer in the picture. Instead, she was always meeting colleagues or clients, people I never met, names I never heard before. Still, I didn't confront her as I kept quiet. I didn't want to cause arguments, and deep down, I was hoping that she would notice my silence and the things I'm doing to bring us back to each other. I adjusted and started doing more around the house. I buried myself in work while she was busy. I constantly remind myself to let her grow and be patient because it'll get better. But by the 4th year of our marriage, it became harder to lie to myself. The warmth we used to share had been replaced by long silences, tired excuses, and a growing emotional gap. We weren't fighting, but that was the problem. We had stopped even bothering to disagree. We were two people just existing under the same roof. I wanted to believe things would turn around, that this was just a rough patch, but in the back of my mind, I was starting to understand that this might actually be what our marriage had become. And even though I saw all the signs, I held on. I clung to the idea of us because I had already poured so much of myself into it. And sometimes, when you've been holding something together for so long, it's hard to admit when it's already fallen apart. One quiet evening, I wasn't supposed to be home that early. I usually stayed late at work or just took my time on the road to avoid traffic. But that day, I decided to close a bit earlier than usual. I pulled into the compound quietly, parked the car, and let myself in through the side entrance. As I stepped closer to the house, I heard a voice, Susan's voice. She was out by the back patio, talking on the phone. As I got closer, her tone caught my attention. It was light and playful. She was laughing in a flirty way. I paused, stayed just behind the wall for a second to be sure I am not concluding quickly. But after listening for about a minute, it was clear enough she was talking to a man. It wasn't business, and it wasn't innocent. I stepped out fully into view and called her name. She physically jolted, like someone who got caught doing something they shouldn't. She looked at me for a second, then at her phone, and without another word, she hung up the call. I asked her, "Who were you talking to?" calmly. But she didn't answer. She got defensive almost immediately, asking why I was sneaking up on her and what I was trying to suggest. I didn't say anything more as I stood there, taking it in. That silence between us said more than anything else she could have explained away. She knew what I saw. I knew what I heard. And even though she tried to act like I was overreacting, The guilt in her eyes told the truth. From that moment, the mood in our home changed. We moved around like strangers. I'd leave early, come back late. She did the same. We barely spoke, and when we did, it was stiff and short. And the worst part was I couldn't stop thinking about that call. I couldn't shake off the feeling that Susan, my wife, was entertaining another man right under my nose. Still, I wasn't ready to end things. As much as it hurt, I wasn't going to let one moment decide the fate of everything we had built. I wanted to believe we could fix things. Maybe she was going through something, and we could talk it out. 2 months had passed since that tense confrontation at home. We kept moving around each other like strangers. So, I decided to make an effort. I told her I wanted us to go out for dinner. I said I thought we needed to talk, maybe reconnect. She paused for a moment, then said, "Okay." I was happy that at least she agreed. I picked a restaurant we used to love back in the early days. I figured sitting in a familiar place might remind us of who we were before everything got messy. Maybe it would help us talk like human beings again. The drive there was strange. She was quiet, kept glancing at her phone, replying to messages, and smiling to herself. I noticed it, but I stayed quiet. I just drove because I didn't want to ruin whatever chance we had by jumping into assumptions or starting an argument before we even sat down. We got to the restaurant, got seated, and right away it was obvious. She wasn't present. She had her phone out on the table, scrolling, tapping, replying to someone or maybe several people. Her eyes barely met mine. I tried to make small talk, asked her about her day, asked how work was going. I even brought up a funny memory from the last time we'd eaten there, hoping she'd laugh or at least smile. She didn't. She just gave these dry, clipped answers, like she was checking a box just to get through the evening. After a while, I went silent. I sat there, watching her thumb hover over her screen while I sat across from her like a background character in her life. That's when I decided to stop pretending. I leaned in and told her plainly that I didn't invite her out for food and awkward silence. I said I wanted us to talk about us, about the way things had been. I told her I knew we'd been drifting apart, and I admitted that I missed her, that I missed how we used to be when we still cared. I said I wanted us to realign, to try and move forward if that was still possible. And I meant every word. I hoped that moment would open a door, even if just a small one. I hoped we'd have a shot at rebuilding what was left. But I didn't know then that what she was about to say next would close every door I thought was still open. She leaned in, like she was about to confess a secret. Her voice dropped, almost like she was embarrassed. And then she said, "I didn't know how to say this, but I'm in love with someone else." I sat there frozen for a second. I didn't ask her who he was. I didn't ask how long it had been going on. I didn't even ask why. I just nodded, took a slow sip of water, swallowed hard, and said, "Good to know." That's all I could manage, not because I didn't have 1,000 things to say, but because suddenly none of them felt worth saying. What was the point? She had made her choice long before that night. That sentence wasn't the beginning. It was the end of a story that had been dying quietly for years. I reached for the waiter, asked for the bill, paid in full, and stood up. I didn't say another word as I walked out of that restaurant without even looking back. I was burning inside with pain. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling, my thoughts running in every direction. I kept asking myself if I missed the signs, if I had been stupid for trying, if all those years of staying quiet and giving her room had just been wasted effort. I was stuck in that space between confusion and clarity. At some point, maybe out of exhaustion, I finally drifted off. But even sleep didn't bring peace. The morning after that dinner felt like the weight of an entire decade had dropped on my chest. Susan moved out of the house that day. I assumed, without even needing confirmation, that she moved in with the man she left me for. And honestly, that was fine. At least now the picture was clear. She made her choice, and I was making mine. I had woken up with a pounding headache, but beneath the fog in my head, I knew exactly what I needed to do. I was done, and now it was time to act like it. So I picked up my phone and called my lawyer. I've known him for years, We've handled a few contracts and some property matters in the past, but this was different. When I told him I needed a divorce attorney, he was quiet for a second, then asked, "Robert, are you serious?" I told him I'd never been more serious about anything. I didn't want back and forth. But that wasn't all. I also told him I wanted the $50,000 I invested in Susan's business returned to me. I explained that I simply wanted to treat it for what it was, a financial investment. I had funded her dream from a place of love back then, but now that love had been pulled out from under me like a rug, I had to view it through a different lens. If the relationship was done, the business tie was done too. Period. To his credit, my lawyer didn't waste any time. He got a divorce attorney involved and handed the investment retrieval to someone on his team who handled business litigation. I told them to work fast, and they did. Every phone call, every email, every draft came quickly, and I approved everything. By the end of that same week, Susan was served with the divorce papers. And not just that, her company also received legal documents demanding the repayment of the $50,000 I had invested. One afternoon, a couple of days after everything had already started falling into place, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. The voice on the other end introduced himself. And just like that, it clicked. It was the man my wife, or rather, my soon-to-be ex-wife, had left me for. He didn't waste time with small talk. He went straight into what he called a polite request. He said he knew about the money I had invested in Susan's business. He said he was now involved in running things, and he begged me not to withdraw my investment. He kept saying things like, "It'll crush the company," and "We just need a little more time." I didn't let him finish. I cut him off right there. I told him not to ever call my number again. I warned him, and I meant it, that if he tried to contact me a second time, I wouldn't be as calm. I made it clear that if he wanted to see what real anger looked like, he should go ahead and try me again. He still tried to plead, but I didn't care. I ended the call and immediately blocked his number. That was the first and last time we ever spoke. As for the divorce proceedings, I won't sit here and lie to you. It wasn't easy. The court system, as expected, leaned in her favor. I've seen it happen too many times to other men, and I felt it firsthand. But I had two things working in my favor. We had no kids, and she had already moved out of the house before anything was filed. That made it harder for her to make a claim on the property or demand more than what was fair. I pushed through it. I stayed focused. I kept my communication through my lawyer. And in the end, I got what I came for, including the $50,000 I had invested in her business, plus interest, because letting her walk away with that too would have been like rewarding betrayal. I don't feel hate when I think about Susan now, but I also don't feel anything close to love. The woman I fell in love with disappeared a long time ago. What was left behind wasn't someone who deserved my loyalty or my protection. So I walked away with my dignity, and I made sure to close every door behind me. Thank you for watching.